What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of upgrading the S13 fuel system. Now in part 1, we installed a Deatchwerks inline fuel filter, a link ethanol content sensor, and we connected it all with some -8 PTFE line. If you haven't seen that video, make sure you go watch that before you watch this one. Now this is part 2, so let's finish the S13 fuel system. So what are we going to be doing? We are going to the back of the car, actually. Alright, so when I got this car, the previous owner had already replaced the fuel hard lines with 3/8 stainless, but there is a section. There's a section back here that is still rubber fuel line. If you can see there, above the gas tank, going to the top of the fuel hanger. So we are going to be replacing that section of rubber line with some -6 PTFE line. Now we also have a Deatchwerks fuel hanger as well as a DW400 pump to go in the tank, but that's not it. We're also going to be tackling one of the most common issues with these cars when they get up to this age, and that is the factory fuel pump wiring. We are going to be bypassing the wiring, and we are going to be hardwiring the fuel pump with a relay so that it always gets good, consistent voltage. So let me show you the parts that we're going to be using. Alright, so let's take a closer look at the Deatchwerks fuel hanger. Alright, so this is the Deatchwerks X1 fuel hanger. It's a nice piece, pretty simple design. This is stainless steel. This is machined aluminum. It's got all the terminals for the wiring. And the nice thing about this is it's got these bulkhead fittings, which is going to be able to go in here, and it's going to allow us to run our -6 PTFE line. Now, if we didn't want to do that, it also has these fittings that screw on here, and then you can just run a regular rubber fuel hose onto this barb with a clamp. Comes with everything else, pretty straightforward. It's got a clamp for the fuel pump to clamp to the hanger, but we'll take a closer look when we actually assemble the fuel hanger. So next we can move on to the fuel pump. Alright, so next we have the DW400. It's pretty straightforward fuel pump. It's nice because this has roughly the same footprint as the factory pump, but this will flow a lot more. DW400, so it's supposed to flow 415 liters per hour, which is some serious flow in a small package. Next, we will take a look at some of the things we're going to be using for the fuel pump hardwire modification that we're going to be doing. Alright, so this is pretty much everything we're going to be using for the fuel pump hardwire modification. We've got some 12 gauge primary wire. It came red and black in a kit. So we'll pretty much just be using the red one. That's going to go to the battery. We're going to have this fuse holder, which is going to go in line to the battery. And then we've got a 5-pin relay. You don't actually need 5-pin. You can use a 4-pin. Along with the leads. And we've got our crimping, stripping tools, solder, flux, and a soldering iron, as well as some shrink tubing and these ring terminals. So that's pretty much all we're going to be using. It's a simple mod that's going to allow us to maintain consistent voltage to the fuel pump. Next, we can move on to some of the fittings for our PTFE lines. Alright, so here we have our -6 PTFE AN line, along with some straight fittings, some 90s. I also have 45s if I need them, but I won't know until I actually start looking at start making the lines. But like I mentioned, the hard lines on the car have been switched out to 3/8 stainless. But to replace the rubber soft line there, we're going to go to AN, and this is basically how we're going to do it. We're going to use these, basically like a tube compression fitting to adapt the hard line to -6, and then we'll be able to connect our -6 PTFE line to those fittings in between the hard line and the fuel hanger. So let's get into it. Okay, so like I previously mentioned, the previous owner has already converted the fuel hard lines to 3/8 stainless steel hard lines. This is nice because the lines won't corrode or rust over time. But in order to connect the hard lines to the fuel hanger, we are going to be converting the hard lines to AN using some tube compression adapters. That way we can keep our system E85 compatible because we'll have PTFE AN lines instead of the regular rubber fuel lines that are there. So I'm going to disconnect the rubber fuel lines from the hard line, from the hard lines, and then I'll show you how the adapters work. Okay, so these are the tube compression adapters. These are similar to the PTFE AN fittings, in that once this lower collar comes off, inside of it there is a olive. It's a little bit different than the PTFE AN line. This has a collet, or whatever you want to call it. Get it? Oh, no! But they work in kind of a similar way. This is the hard line that I cut off. Basically, this lower collar is going to slip over. Obviously, you wouldn't have this flare, so it's just going to be straight hard line. So this will be able to slip over. The olive will slip on top of the hard line, which is a perfect fit. And then you're going to attach the top part of this fitting on. And as you tighten the two pieces together, it will sandwich the olive inside, and it will produce basically like a crush sealing effect on the hard line, where this olive will be pretty much fixed to the hard line. And that's going to allow us to convert the hard line to AN. So I'm going to install these adapters on the hard line, and I got the soft lines removed so that we'll be able to use those to make our PTFE AN lines. So I'm going to get these installed and pick it back up from there. Okay, so I don't know how easy it is to see, but I have cut off the ends of the hard line that had some type of flare in it. I basically just cut it off with like a pipe cutter, a tube cutter. And that's going to allow us to put the tube compression adapters on. So like I mentioned previously at the table, how this is going to work is the collar is going to slip over, and then the olive is going to slip over the line. And then the remaining piece of the fitting is going to go over, and these will sandwich that piece, will sandwich that olive in there. So I'm going to get these installed, and hopefully that means that our hard lines will be able to adapt to AN after this. Alright, so as you can see, I've got our soft lines removed. We're going to be able to use this to get the length that we're going to need to make our S13-6 PTFE line. So you've seen in the last two videos how to assemble PTFE AN lines, so let's just get to it. Alright, so got the two lines half done. I don't have fittings on this end yet because I'm not sure what fittings I'm going to need until I get the fuel hanger in place and see which way the bulkhead fittings are going to be pointed. So I'm going to start assembling the fuel hanger so that we can get it ready to go into the tank, and then I'll know which way the bulkhead fittings are going to be oriented so that I can put the remaining two fittings on the lines. So let's start assembling the fuel hanger. Alright, so as you can see, we've got the factory harness terminated with all the ring terminals, and we got the DW400 pump installed, transferred over the fuel level, as well as the low fuel light sensor. And I actually had to grind down this part of the bracket because it was actually interfering with the fuel level. It had a little bit of resistance, so now it's free. But other than that, pretty much good to go. Wired the pump in. So for the DW400, it has 3 wires coming out of it. 2 of them are black. One of them's really thin gauge. Not sure what that was for, but they go into the same pin. So I just grounded them both. This is the pump positive. So black goes to the pump negative. We've got our fuel light, which is right here. And then we've got our fuel level attached here. So I also put in both the O-rings. There's O-rings that go in underneath and on top. And I think this is roughly how I'm going to want the bulkheads positioned. But we'll have a better idea once I put it in the car. So let's go install it. Alright, so we've got the DW hanger installed. I am going to have to change that gasket once it comes in. But now we can get an idea of how our AN lines are going to meet up with the hanger. So I can finish those with fittings on the ends. And then we can move on to the fuel pump hardwire. Alright, so looks like maybe this 45 would be good. Then probably a straight. I mean, realistically, if I turned this bulkhead more, I could probably just put a straight on the ends. So let's see if we can do that. Yeah, I think we could probably just put the straights on here. So, as you could see, I was able to finish up the lines, and the lines are installed, connected to the hard line, and then it goes up into the fuel hanger. Alright, so now you can see that the PTFE lines are connected to the hard lines at the bottom, and they're connected here at the top. At the fuel hat, I did mark feed and return just on the actual line itself in case in the future I ever disconnect them both and just have them sitting. I know which one's which. I don't have to go under and trace the line or whatever. So, yeah, and just like that, our fuel system is now fully ready for E85. And that means we only have one more upgrade left to do, and that is the old fuel pump wiring. Now, one of the issues that happens pretty often on these cars, especially now that they're getting old, like I mentioned before, this 240 or S13, it's getting up there in age. This one is 32 years old. That means the original wiring is old. It can be brittle. And what does that mean? That means that you could potentially get voltage drop to your fuel pump, which is definitely not something you want, especially if you are getting it tuned to make more power, or let's say you're drifting it or lapping and you're full throttle under boost. It's just bad news. Now, I'm not saying that it happens on every S chassis, but why take that chance? The cars are getting old, like I said, and I've done this mod on the FC. And personally, I will do it on all my S chassis because it's honestly not a difficult thing to do, and it's just cheap insurance. So let's get into it. Alright, so as I briefly touched on at the beginning of the video, here is everything that we will be using. So we've got our 12 gauge primary wire here. We've got our fuse holder, also with matching 12 gauge wire. Inside it, I have a 40 amp fuse. And then we've got our 40 amp 5-pin relay. It also has matching 12 gauge leads on it, or at least the power and the ground are. Those are the two that really matter. We've also got our solder, flux, heat shrink and some ring terminals, a lighter to shrink the heat shrink, and crimpers, wire strippers off on the side there. Yeah, that's pretty much all we need to do this mod. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crimp on a ring terminal, probably onto the fuse holder, and then we are going to solder the other end of the fuse holder to our primary wire. I am going to try to sleeve it with the sleeving, just so I don't have a red wire running through the car. I guess I could have used the black wire, but that just doesn't seem... I feel like a power wire should always be red. But yeah, so we can do that, and then we'll be able to run this wire through the firewall, through the cabin, into the trunk area. So let's start on that. Alright, so we've got our primary wire attached to the fuse holder, and it's all loomed up, so it's not just the wire running through the entire car. So now we can go ahead and run this down the car and go to the trunk area. Alright, so I have run a fishing wire through the inside. There is a grommet located up in the wheel well. You can see it from inside the engine bay. There's a little triangle opening here, and it's coming through here. So I'm going to tape the primary wire to this, and then I can fish it through. Alright, so pulled it through, just taped it through, taped it onto this, and then pulled it through. Now I can run it the rest of the way in the car and bring it out probably somewhere along here where this wiring is. All right, so I know I didn't explain much, but we basically have everything finished. You saw me extending wires and soldering things. That soldering iron is really old. It actually is broken. It doesn't heat up. There's only a certain spot on it that actually heats up. So that made soldering things very difficult, but got it done. So I'm gonna try to explain how this hardwire works. There's a lot of information online, like it's really not that difficult, but to try and explain it, we have a relay here. So we're basically bypassing the factory relay in the engine bay. And instead of using the power source from the chassis or the ECU to power our fuel pump, we are using that power source to trigger this relay, which will allow us to power our pump using the primary wire that we ran from the battery directly to this relay. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I'll break down the wiring or how to connect everything. So basically we have our relay here, which is a 5-pin relay, but you only need to use 4. So I have this blue wire taped up. This is the 87A pin on the relay, the middle one, that we don't use. So I'll try to go over this. It might be difficult since there's no visual for us, but the positive, so basically we're taking power from the battery in the front with a fuse that goes into pin 30 on the relay. Okay, following? Now pin 87, which is this red one right here, that goes down and it's actually connected to the white and purple wire that was in this plug. So what I did was I cut that wire. So we have 2 ends now. We have one going to the fuel pump and one coming from the plug. So that red wire on the relay, pin 87, that is going to the white and purple wire that I cut, that is going to the fuel pump. All right, so we've got that covered. Now the white and purple wire that I cut, that's coming from the plug, that was disconnected because I cut it, so that actually had to go to this white wire, which is pin 85. Okay, pretty straightforward. And then our last pin on this relay, which is this yellow wire, that actually gets grounded. And the way I did that is there was a blue wire with a red line coming out of this plug as well, and that essentially is the negative for the fuel pump. So because I don't need it coming from the plug, or you would just cut it anyways, I depinned it, pulled it out of the plug, and that is connected to this wire, which is also connected to the yellow, which is pin 86 from the relay, and it is all commonly grounded to this one bolt right here. So hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, you can comment and I'll try to explain it as well. But we can plug this back in and that's it. There we have our fuel pump hardwired to its own relay, getting direct power from the battery using the ECU to trigger the relay. Make sense? I hope that makes sense. So that is the last thing that we had to do in this video. With the fuel pump hardwired, our fuel system is basically done for the S13. It's ready for E85. You know, if you want that extra sauce, and of course, we all love extra sauce. But yeah, this combined with the first video, where I did the fuel filter, the ethanol content sensor, and I did some plumbing with some lines in the engine bay. This basically wraps up our S13 fuel system, at least until we put the engine in. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Maybe you found it helpful, and I hope that this can maybe help you guys with your S chassis build. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you click the like button. If you're not already subscribed, make sure you click that subscribe button. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. Let's get this S13 done, and I'll see you guys in the next one.